Awesome. All right, I'll start recording to the cloud, and I'll be a couple of minutes here trying to set up a YouTube live stream. So please bear with me for just a sec. Okay, it looks like the YouTube live stream is getting a bit complicated here. I'll try and see if we can live stream on Facebook instead. Okay, so it looks like the Facebook live stream is setting up well without any issues. Just give it a few seconds so it can start up. Okay, we'll just let that do its thing. So we'll get started in just a minute here. Just want to allow more folks to join. Okay, great. People can see it. I'm actually going to share with you a URL. So if you want to invite others, please feel free to share this. We're going to hang on for another minute here before others allow others to join. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So a lot of the folks that I'm seeing here in the participant list have already joined us before. So we'll go rather quickly with introductions. Again, as you know, the webinar is being recorded now. It's also being live streamed on Facebook, or at least it should be. I know there's one new person, I believe Matthew. So I'll do this mainly for you, Matthew. So the other folks have already heard this intro plenty of times. So my main work with SOP Technologies is actually in the environmental technology space, but we started getting involved with this effort. We're calling it the Ventilators Collaboration Network as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're really trying to help different groups out there that are working on projects focusing on ventilators, especially these very low cost and open source ventilators, to accelerate what they're doing. So calls in the past have focused on either a specific project, or like the last call, it was talking more about testing for various projects. There are three main ways that we're facilitating the collaboration. One is with the webinars. We also have the Slack space, and you can also share about your projects or different contacts via our website. And I'll go into that a little bit more here. So for example, if you look at the Ventilators projects page, when you go to this link up here, soptechint.com/ventilators, anyone can submit a new project. And what that is once you click that, you fill out a Google form, and that form information that you submit will automatically populate a table below. So currently, I think about 20 projects are listed there. There are many more around the world, but that's just 20 people that decided to submit their own project information. Government contacts, similar format, where if you have a contact that you would like to share, you can just fill the form out and it will automatically populate the table below. Suppliers, vendors, and manufacturers. So if you're a manufacturer and you have capability, or an engineering firm or somebody else that would like to provide some type of service to support these projects, you can fill out the form. And have some good news on that actually from earlier today. And there's also a link in case somebody would like to request ventilators, either to have them as a test unit, or once they're available for for broader implementation. Right now, as far as I know, very few of these open source ventilators have already gone through significant testing that would be needed for use on patients. That's part of the reason why we're doing this, because we want to help accelerate these processes and these projects. And there's a link there to our newsletter, and also if you would like to support our efforts. So here are some recent updates. So yesterday I sent out a mass email to hundreds of companies that are listed on, actually I looked at thomas.net as my source. I looked for companies that are either engineering firms, for various types of engineering or manufacturing. And I sent out this mass email just last night. And between last night and today, 11 more manufacturers signed up on our website. So they went on their own, they filled out the form to share the capabilities that they have, that they would like to offer for different folks that are working on projects for ventilators. So please feel free to contact any of those firms. They put that information out there. SOP Technologies is not a go-between in this. They voluntarily put their information up there, so please feel free to contact them. Another update here, I think Brett, during yesterday's call, you had asked for this document for the FDA emergency use authorization, which is essentially the application, so to speak, that you would submit to the Food and Drug Administration in the United States if you want to have your project reviewed. So I went ahead and added that document as an attachment on our website in the government section. Another update, you might have already received this via email, is that Rice University, they actually started this Apollo BVM project, an open source ventilator project, I think over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And with the issues happening with COVID-19, they decided to bring that project back up again. So, you know, they had a head start compared to a lot of other groups, and they just added their technical files on their website. So you do need to register on that page, and then you have access to all of these files. But as far as I know, it seems pretty complete. I didn't really look at it in too much detail, but that is good news that more organizations out there are openly sharing their technical files. So, let me go to the next slide here. So let's have just a brief moment of silence for those that have been lost due to COVID-19. Thank you. I do this because I think it's important for us to always keep in mind that many lives have been lost. We are obviously focusing on the solutions, and we're putting a lot of work into these different projects. But I think it's important to realize, you know, that this is still an ongoing threat globally. So with that said, here we are at the introductions section. You've already heard a little bit about me and SOP Technologies and what we do and what we're working on. But let's go through the list of the participants now and see if each person can give a quick intro. So Alex Bobatek, would you like to unmute yourself and provide a quick intro?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, good morning. I'm a trained electrical engineer who has done a lot in basically designing and home crafting, a lot of mechanically engineered, a lot of programming. I've built a number of devices for the aircraft industry in the past, or I should say designed, but now I work professionally in a day job as a spam fighter, leading AT&T's mobile messaging defenses. Some of the things I've built include a blower, which I'm researching now, but I'm probably better as an integrator, and looking to, I've started in on some of the, I mentioned the blower, there are a few other pieces of a potential ventilator solution as well as test apparatus that I've worked on. And I'm a guy with some capabilities in design and construction and integration, looking for a role.
Great, thank you, Alex. Brett, would you like to provide a quick intro?
Sure. Good morning, team. This is Brett Shulcott of Ag Eagle Area Systems. We're based in Deodesha, Kansas. We normally build drones and drone technology, including delivery drone technology, and we have the capacity to build ventilators. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Don Campo. Don Campo, if you would like to provide a brief intro.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Rob, who's kind of the leader of our small group, because it sounds like we may be redirecting our focus a little bit. So I'll let him take the lead. I'm a mechanical engineer, worked in mechanical and aerospace. I've worked in the oil and gas industry for 40 years, and I've been involved with a lot of cutting edge technology for oil and gas industry.
Great, thank you, Don. Jim Pearson, would you like to provide a brief intro?
Hey everybody, it's Jim Pearson. I own a small manufacturing company in Southeast Michigan called Rocket Manufacturing. We are basically just here ready to start building. Once we figure out what is needed and when and where it's needed, that's what we're here for. I've also started taking a look at the models for the MIT system and the Israeli AMBO bag.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to start building one of each of those just to see how producible it is and to get programs in place.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. And by the way, have you reached out to other groups, and what have they told you about building their systems and collaborating?
It seems like everyone's very busy. I've reached out to a few groups. A few groups have reached out to me and through email, and I tend not to either get a reply or a very short reply.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Matthew Drummer. Matthew, would you like to provide a brief intro?
Sure. My name's Matt Drummer. I work for ADM-tronics Unlimited. We're a contract manufacturer and also a development team. We specialize in actual medical devices, and we have a team of electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and software developers, plus a fairly good regulatory department.
Fantastic, Matt. A question, since you're more focused on this field, what is your take so far, based off of what you've seen, read in the news, or your interactions with different teams? What's your take on these open source type of ventilator projects?
A little bit of professional skepticism on it, because those ambo bags really weren't meant for continuous use. Plus, the ventilator itself, although some of the older ones are somewhat simpler, there are a number of other things that you have to worry about, like the peak pressure and the respiratory rate and tidal volumes.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Right.
Okay, we have Rob Kirby. Go ahead and change the slide, Rob, because I believe the next slide is already your intro here. So, Rob, would you like to actually take it from here and maybe share your screen and your slides?
Sure, I'll do that.
So I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, no, yeah, okay.
Let's see if I can give you
I just go like that, and I think
access here. Let's see. I'll make you a co-host.
I don't think you need to, but anyway, I'm up already in there.
Awesome.
So I guess I'll do a bit of the intro here while the slide soaks in a little bit. As Don mentioned, we had started with another partner or contact, I guess 3 weeks ago. Seems like longer than that, maybe less than that.
Can everybody hear Rob? I can barely hear him. I don't know if it's me or other people's.
Is that better? I hear my microphone's a little weak.
Yeah, I might want to get closer to it if possible, or speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, I think I'm on top of it. Is that better?
It still sounds a little low, but I'll go ahead and mute myself to minimize any additional volume that might be coming from my end, but it does sound a little low.
Okay, I'll try to project to the wherever the microphone is. I don't see a mic on my.
That's much better. That's much better right now, the way you're doing it.
Okay. All right. So anyway, Don and I and another partner sort of started roughly 3 weeks ago. We heard the need, and like several people here, we found MIT. We found several people. Kind of looked like they were starting to stall out. We had opted to drop our design and just go with somebody else's mechanical that was open source, as we didn't see the mechanical being the most difficult, as somebody's already mentioned. The other elements, the control circuitry and sensor array is the more challenging. So we decided we would jump in on that when people got their designs finalized. And we also viewed the fact that you could replace the pump if you treated it as a modular unit. It could be replaced with something more appropriate, but we were thinking that the response time needed to be weeks instead of months, and the ambu bag looked like a quick response for the US market, possibly Canada. So anyway, that's sort of how we got started. We have, I guess, made attempts to contact people on the user side to determine how critical and do we need to try to ramp up response, and haven't had a lot of luck with that. That seems to be a problem. Seems to be a problem looking back. But basically, I guess, where are we? You know, we're with this group here now. I think it's safe to say we're still trying to identify someone that is reaching out for help. Everyone seems to feel they're okay. We hear reports they're not. I don't know how to rectify that. So that's sort of a reach out. If anybody has any ideas, you know, we've hammered pretty hard on our side at our federal government and gotten to committees and alleged groups, and what they say to us does not match what they repeat to the news. So I have no explanation for that. Where are we going? Basically, you know, our intent was to get to prototype stage, and so we think we're going to go ahead and do that based on an ambu bag and a modular concept. In this drawing here, I sort of really was impressed with what the South American team had accomplished, basically without any electronics except for the windshield wiper motor. They addressed a lot of the issues. Those were in the presentation. They were able to address some of the control issues that the electronic devices seem to be required for. I'm not saying that that's the solution. I think it points to there's not a one-size-fit-all solution for the world. So I'll kind of use that to summarize what's been accomplished. I think at this point, there are roughly 50 teams working on, I guess, what we'll generically call open source ventilators. That's pretty impressive. Although you look back in prior crisis situations, some of these teams had started back in '09. MIT in particular comes to mind. So, you know, I hope we don't repeat the past, that these things stall out and they wait for the next hot spot and then seem to replow the same ground. So I guess that leads into the what's next. I've talked with Emilio, and Don, and a little bit to our machine shop partner. And I think we're going to go ahead and get a prototype done because we've already purchased the ambu bag. My company does electronic board layout, and we have access to programmers and people that can construct PCB boards. We build small electronic mechanical devices for downhole drilling, which is a very harsh environment. So we believe that we can adapt our manufacturing over to do something that would function if we can get the right sensors, which we've identified. So our intent was to just, as I said, I think we're looking at just grabbing a existing mechanical design, and we kind of like the Israeli design because it seemed to hit the starting point very rapidly. So next slide, you know, we would like to pull bits and pieces from what we see has been developed on people who are willing to share open source, which everyone pretty much that we've reached out to says they're open source, and there's no problem with that. That allows us to sort of do a modular effort, which allows us basically we just need a mechanic building on, and we want to take it as far as we can in testing based on support. And we've all been frustrated not being able to get much medical input. I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt and say perhaps they're busy right now, but that will change. And so that's why I think, you know, our intent is we'll go as far as we can when things slow down, and we'll reach out and hopefully we can find somebody who would at least review what we've done. I'm not looking for a full medical test, I don't think, but just review so that we'll be at that point going forward next time. When I say next time, not that we're standing down on the present situation, we can talk about that a little bit later, but I think most of us who've been here for a while and have attempted to reach out are about ready to give up on that and say apparently the reality we read about does not match the reality of those that seem to be on the front lines that we are able to reach out to.
Rob, just 1 second. I would love it if Matt can give some insights into this because, you know, being in the medical device world, Matt, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've tried to find out if there's actual demand for these. You know, what are some of your thoughts around what Rob is talking about here?
Yeah, well, we've only just started to think about this. Our CEO was going to be on this call, but I think he'll be on the Friday call. I should be on that one as well with him. We only just started to look at this literally the other day, and we just have very, very basic inputs on this. We're looking at an average tidal volume of about 500 milliliters. Typically, the pressure you want to regulate to is about 25 centimeters of water, and you don't want to have any more. The maximum pressure you're talking about is 40 to 50 centimeters of water max. So you need some sort of a pressure release valve. The other thing that you have to think about is switching inspiratory to expiratory. Basically, when you push the air into the patient, it has to go through one path. And then when the patient exhales, it needs to go literally not back through your machine, through a separate valve. There's a special valve for that, that when you're under the positive inspiratory pressure, it actually shuts the valve. And when the machine is actually, I like the piston design, by the way. We were thinking about something along the same lines. When the patient exhales, you have a negative pressure in that piston area, which actually opens the valve and allows the patient to exhale without contaminating the machine. But again, this is just, you're talking about an afternoon's worth of work on it. That's
Got it.
time.
Got it. Okay, so maybe Rob's input here is great, because he's been reaching out to a lot of folks, trying to understand, you know, what is the actual demand and need for this. He's been analyzing the speed with which different projects have been moving forward. So I just leave it at that. Rob, sorry for interrupting you. Now, Don, it seems like you might have some comments there too.
Yeah, no, that's a good.
Yeah, just to comment on what he said. Yeah, our initial design incorporates everything that he mentioned. The only thing we overlooked initially was the ability to mix gases, you know, with pure oxygen and room air, and we've now incorporated that as well. So this, you know, the more I learned about the physiology of the lung, the more I realized that this was a lot more complicated than just articulating some kind of an accumulator device, like an ammo bag or some kind of a pneumatic bag. But we can control tidal volume. We have you know, max pressure, essentially a pop-off valve, check valves, and all, you know, all those sort of things. And some of those are actually subcomponents of the more sophisticated ambo bag, so they're pretty easy to accomplish.
Got it, got it. But just so I understand, and Rob, I know you're going to provide more details on this. Are you going to use the Israeli ambo vent design from all the physical components of that and focus on the instrumentation and code? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, basically, since we have an ambu bag, we, you know, the simplest way forward was just to use that. But I guess when you, depending on how you instrument it and how you activate it and how you respond to what it does when you activate it. And when I say all that, you know, a piston obviously is a lot easier to do volumetric control on. But we started with the ambu bag. I don't think with, you know, with instrumentation, if we treat it like a bellows, we won't be able to calculate volumetrics based on deformation. We'd have to measure that directly. But we can get to the point, as Don said, with full instrumentation, no matter what is at the heart of the machine. And we've selected the Israeli because that was the first full set of prints available. And we likely will tweak a few things. I haven't studied them in depth, but if you just turn the ambu bag into a bellows, it does, as Don said, it's got a few features in it. It's got some valves that you can take advantage of. You may have to put flanges and things on. But again, we're not looking at this to build something to roll out immediately. It's just that allows us to develop the top tier element that turns this, whatever you want to call it, I call it a sub-assembly. To turn this into a full ventilator system requires electronics and computer controls. Although the Brazilians did quite an impressive effort using analog, and you know, you would have to have someone trained to use that, because they'd have to understand what they were looking at. I mean, and I'm not discrediting their effort in any way whatsoever. As I said, once we get a working model, then our intent is to then figure out, how do you make it better? How do you adapt it to the global situation, because not everywhere, as they stated, have access to all those things. So to that end, and I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead here, but there's two ways to address that. You can deal with what they have locally, or you can figure out how to get global assistance to augment the shortcomings. I mean, go through global entities that respond in crisis.
Got it. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt your flow. Yeah. So please continue.
But good call, Mark. You're exactly correct. Your observation was what we observed on roughly the 50 projects. Everyone was focusing on, call it the heart of the machine. Hadn't really, nothing, no discredit to them. They weren't human engineers. They were electrical, mechanical, MacGyvers, whatever you want to say. They jumped in and started, and that had to be done, right? You had to have something to start with. But your observation, I think, is very valid. In a crisis, it's better than nothing, but it would be difficult to get someone to implement that unless they were sitting there with no other option. And that's a hard thing to address, because to that end, you'd have to build them on spec. And then I hope you would never find anyone in that situation, but that's how you'd have to sell it. So we recognize that you need a little bit more of a normal looking and performing apparatus. And we also deal in artificial intelligence in our business, because obviously our equipment runs 2 miles below the surface of the earth. We can't go down and manipulate it, steer it, look at it, adjust it. So
Rob,
that will all be computer controlled. So
Rob, I think Matthew might have had a comment there that he wanted to chime in on.
Okay.
It's one of the things that when we first started thinking about this, literally yesterday, we figured that the ventilators are older than CPUs. Well, I mean, not technically, but the ones that we know of today. So many of the early ventilators in the 40s and 50s, although they had some electronics bases, were largely mechanical. You're talking about from the polio epidemics on, so anything above an iron lung. In fact, there's one inventor that's Jack Emerson. I'll type it in the comments here. He actually did a ventilator that looked like it was based off the iron lung, but it was portable. You wore it like a torso suit, and he built it out of a vacuum cleaner. We found, just looking back, and how they dealt with control problems in the era where there were no CPUs that you can regularly get, helpful.
No, and that's all valid and likely would be good in other parts of the world. Our input, the limited bit we got from the US market, was this had to be easily run by probably a trained individual. Again, the initial modeling looking at overrunning the present medical system and probably ending up treating patients in hotel bedroom, in hotel rooms, and therefore either you had to send a technician to run your equipment if it wasn't fairly automated, or you had to have the system had to pretty much run itself under full electronic control with alarms and some way to contact an expert, or have an expert very quickly train whatever. So we ruled out for the US, we ruled out mechanical systems because they required medical knowledge that apparently wasn't going to possibly be available. Now, again, all this said, you do what you got to do in a situation, but we were attempting to make sure whatever we delivered would be usable. And pretty much initially we were told it's not just ventilators. We don't have people that know how to run them. Probably to your statement, I mean, I'm guessing maybe those people were looking at what you were looking at. They had a mixed fleet, and all their specialists were tied up in plan. As a plan, they would be tied up with the more user demanding equipment, and the other equipment would be put where they had less experience. I'm guessing, I have no idea, but anyway, we don't need to dwell on that. That's how we got to our model was, we wanted to emulate the $50,000 to $100,000 machine, and put the Lamborghini dashboard on our Volkswagen Beetle engine, and we knew we could always upgrade the engine. But in the interest of getting something out rapidly, we said everybody's pretty much jumped on the ambu bag. It looks pretty good. Let's just go with that. Let's take the next step, because everyone's tied up with that right now, wrapping that up. So anyway, that's how we got where we got. So as I said earlier, our intent is to finish this, if we have to by ourselves, as far as we can take it, which would be to build 2 or 3 iterations, because we assume the first prototypes will discover that certain things don't work the way we thought. And then we'll look at modular modifications once we get that working system, and reach out to people globally to determine, what's your world look like? I mean, what can you use? What would you have needed, or what did you need? And again, this is a little bit futuristic looking, because I don't think realistically, we probably won't get that done in this wave. I say it that way because this may be a 3 wave. If history is any indicator, a lot of these are 2 or 3 year pattern. They hit one wave, it subsides, there's a slight mutation, and then a resurgence. And so we may have to deploy after all. This first wave is looking a bit dubious in the U.S.
Rob, just a question here, because I know you had a slide where you spoke about the process that you're planning on following. I think it would be great for folks to see that, because it would be good for people to see how they can be involved in your process or help you and collaborate with you, so that your work can move forward as quickly as possible, with the understanding, obviously, that this is likely not going to happen just within the next couple of weeks. But hopefully we can have the folks on the call give you more specific insights or ideas for your project, and get an understanding of how they can collaborate with you.
Yeah. Good catch. I got sidetracked by a few questions there. So to wrap up, as we have already kind of stated, we're going to use the Israeli mechanical ambu bag design for the base, and our intent is to instrument that. We have the Honeywell instrument pack that we're looking at for specs. Don't know if we'll use those specific components for pressure, flow, and all the other features. And then we'll do our own board and our own software, probably based on a microchip processor. And again, nothing against the Arduino. That was a good board that was readily accessible to people that weren't able to build their own boards to get the basic computer control testing done that they are in various stages of progressing on. But there's a limited supply of those in the world, and you rely on someone else to manufacture those. So anyway, that's our intent. Once we get our system, as I said, it's going to be modular. We intend to tweak it based on input we are able to get. If anybody cares to put it up, then it'll be shelved as tested until such time that it looks like it's needed. And hopefully it'll never be needed. But I guess the goal here was not to repeat history and not to see if this raises its head in 18 months or if it's another 10 years as these. I guess there's been 3 of these pandemics, and they've all been in the 20th century, or I guess maybe 4. This will be the 4th one.
So Rob,
they've all been in the 20th century. They're variously spaced apart. 1918 was the first, and then 59, 58, 59, 68, and then the 08, and now this one. So I guess that's 5.
So Rob, okay, so I think you bring up a good point, and this is one of the reasons why I really like what you're talking about, is that a lot of the projects that are out there right now, these open source projects, they use things that are more readily available, at least in the short term, which is, for example, the Arduino boards. But what you're really trying to do is create the code and have instrumentation that's a little bit more specific for this purpose, instead of using Arduino, and in a way that can be scaled up a little bit more. So are you seeking collaboration with companies like Brett's company, Matthew's company, or others, so that you can do this with a collaborative effort with others?
I mean, we're open to it. We had sort of given up on that. We really need medical. I mean, we have the ability to design PCB boards. We can outsource getting those built. They're pretty inexpensive to build depending on what components you use. So really, I mean, if someone wanted to, they're welcome, but you know, basically the board and the software we're able to do all internally if we have to. Certainly we would welcome anybody wanting to help, but you know, we're not talking about building hundreds of these. We're talking about building, you know, maybe three sets of 3 different styles perhaps, and probably not changing the processor board unless we have to make adjustments in sensors or something that require a different component that changes our board layout. So
Okay, because it sounds to me like having a company that works on medical devices would be great if you can, you know, collaborate with, you know, someone that already has experience in that area, especially if they have the electrical, mechanical engineers, the coders as well, so that you can, even if it's only 3 versions of this, but I think it will be a lot more polished if you can have some of that feedback going on while you're building this.
yeah, no, I'm 100% open to that. Those who know the history of a similar type situation, I don't know the viability of that. I mean, we aren't in the medical equipment business. Prior low-cost ventilators became purchased by larger medical manufacturers, and the low-cost project got shelved. So I'm not being ugly, I'm not being ignorant. I'm, as a small business person, I would probably not help someone trying to build an open source drilling tool to compete in my market. I mean, I'm just being realistic. I know that sounds capitalistic and it sounds ugly, but you know, I'm open for it. I mean, would have no issue, but I'm assuming that someone that is manufacturing that type of equipment, I mean, how does that work in their model? I mean, you have to understand, not many of these ventilators get sold. So if you have 5 or 6 manufacturers, you can understand real quickly why, you know, there's not a lot of ventilator manufacturers. Just, you know, yeah. I think we have to come up with a new model, and we're proposing that new model. Again, we're not going to sell these. That's not the intent. The intent is to have, in an emergency, it's a parachute. We're not building airplanes. We're building parachutes. So, in the medical industry, yes, if you want to participate in a parachute, great. You know, we have no intention of destroying your market, replacing your equipment, but it seems like there's a fairly large potential for these events to continue occurring, and there's a particular virus I won't go into today, maybe a future discussion. I discovered probably why the reaction was as severe to this as it was. There's another virus out there that has a 39% death rate or mortality rate. Now, fortunately, it doesn't transmit human to human yet, but nobody knows what it looks like. So anyway, that's another topic, but for now, yes, I'm open to it. Amelia,
okay, great. So Matt, what's your take on that? We know that there are obviously very large companies out there. They're building these expensive devices that have been thoroughly tested, and they're out there in the market. What's your take on this from the medical device company point of view?
This is a life support device, so in anything with FDA manufactured equipment, there are a whole bunch of regulatory hurdles you have to jump through, and there are a whole bunch of standards you have to adhere to. I think I can't speak for the financial aspect. I'm more on the engineering side. That would be more Andre, our CEO, on Friday. But I see it as an altruistic venture, and we would be up to helping. And again, we've just started looking into this. Our concern is that, knowing what we don't know, is it possible to hurt unintentionally or a person? It's what they call the hazard analysis or risk analysis in medical devices. So we're proceeding somewhat cautiously, but I'm optimistic that a simple ventilator system can be manufactured.
Great to hear. Rob, sorry for cutting you off. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I mean, you know, I guess to the answer of you know, what next. I mean, We do have the names of the prior government-sponsored low-cost emergency ventilator group, and we're chasing that down to find out. But they're no longer with the company that became acquired. Just to and again, it's not going to happen in short order for this present situation. Again, we've more decided that we don't want to see a repeat of this where, 10 years from now, we're looking back like we're looking back now at efforts in 2011 that just basically faded and never really delivered anything. So the intent is to, not have that happen. We'll have time. People will have time to talk. We'll continue pressing on the government agencies to the end of the FDA testing. As we all know, they've waived most of that in the present situation. Maybe because they know no one's likely going to come up with it. I have no idea. Those are all questions that we want to get answers to. I mean, I guess I'm, for lots of reasons, I'll shut up after this. A lot of money was spent. And if in fact the article is accurate and the government, us taxpayers, paid for an emergency low-cost ventilator design that became shelved after an acquisition, I'd like my representatives to answer for that. I mean, what happened? And if that's true, where are the drawings? Where are the designs? I mean, they built prototypes, they tested them, they were ready to start rolling them out in human tests. So they were much further along, and we paid for that. So anyway, I'll end with that. I don't want to get into politics, but as an engineer and understanding how these systems are evolved and paid for, I think that in addition to us, and I say the us, everyone on this phone call, we're all interested in trying to help. And if in fact there's some ground that's been paved that'll help with that, then I think we need to turn those stones over and find out where that went. Okay, I think Matt had a comment there.
Yeah, I do know of one instance in New York where New York City actually purchased a whole bunch of ventilators for this very purpose. Unfortunately, the maintenance of the ventilators was too much, so they were auctioned off. There are things in the ventilator like an oxygen sensor, which is basically like an air battery. It has a set lifespan, and they can't be sitting on a shelf for months or years without actually checking those sensors, calibrating those sensors. So the maintenance and upkeep of that was too much, and unfortunately, New York City, dire in need of ventilators right now, actually auctioned them off about 5-6 years ago.
Thanks for that insight, Matt. So I know, Rob, you had another slide, I believe, that had processes laid out, or the steps that you're planning on taking. Would you like to maybe ask this group that we have here for insights, or what questions they have for you, or do you have any questions for the group for each of these process steps? Because it sounds like you have something very specific that you're working on. You're going to build the AMBU vent unit from Israel, and you're going to be working on the instrumentation and code to work with that as a starting point. And I think it's a great opportunity to try and get input from folks that we have right now on the call.
Sure. I'm trying to get this to blow up. Having trouble getting to the, I guess, can you guys see that? I apologize, I can't get to the PowerPoint slide screen menu here.
So the slide that I'm seeing says specifics, and it has a blue cloud on the left, and on the right side it has 2 bullet points. This is the first presentation I sent you, and the second one was the modified one, so I'm not sure which one you're speaking of. Okay, this was the proposal slide. Is this one you're talking about? It might be taking a few seconds to load. I believe it was one that was called proposal, and on the left side, or the bottom part, it had some chevrons.
This is it. So.
Okay, so right now I'm not seeing it on my screen.
Why? I'm still sharing.
So if you click the share icon on the bottom, maybe you're sharing a different app.
Well, let's see. Not letting me get out of that.
Okay, so let's see if I can try sharing on my side.
Does that show up?
Let's see, I'm still not seeing it. I'll try sharing it on my end. So I'll stop sharing your screen and I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if this works. So I'm sharing my PowerPoint now.
Okay, you took sharing away from me.
So let's see here. This, a proposal. Can you see the slide that I have up right now that says a proposal?
Okay, can you see mine? Because I got it on mine now, but I can't see your slide anymore.
Okay, so you're not seeing on my screen where it says a proposal?
Yeah, I'm seeing that. I'm not sure. It looks like it's on my computer. Okay, if you guys can hear me, I can discuss this and know where it's coming from. Yes, our intent is to just look at all the effort, try to pick the best components, but to Matthew's concern, you know, we're not going to, at this time, complicate it by changing out the ambu bag. Again, we're not trying to build these to deploy. We're trying to build them to develop the add-on element. So the ambu bag allows us to take that step, and then you can replace that down the road. Obviously, a piston offers a lot of benefits over the ambu bag. We want the system, the mechanical system, to be modular, such that if you want to change the ambu bag out, not a problem. When I say that, I'm talking about the oxygen mixing and a lot of the other features that the plumbing, if you would, could be uploaded onto a different source of air, whether it be the ambu bag or a bellows or a piston. We looked at pneumatics as well. And then we're going to instrument this ambu bag first run system. Use that to get our instrumentation package working. Develop the control software around a simple microchip processor. And then we're going to test this to the best of our ability. When I say that, I mean, we can test based on all the functionality, and there's a lot of this information that's uploaded onto the web page. There's a whole series of YouTube videos. I believe there's 6 or 7 that go into how a ventilator works and how the patient interacts with it. There's a lot of stuff there. But anyway, if we can get medical expertise, I mean, we believe we will be able to get at least some input. Then that's as far as we get, because there's no crisis and therefore nobody willing to give it a try in a life or death situation, which is a good thing, I think. Then we're going to go ahead and just take it as far as it can be, so that should this happen again, we're not starting from, you know, a basic mechanical design and then realizing, oh, it has to be instrumented, oh, it has to have this, oh, it has to have that. So we hope to move the start point this time beyond just the mechanical element, which is where we seem to have stalled historically.
Okay. So do you or Don have any questions for the group? Any insights that you would like from the group? Because now that we have a captive audience, I think it's a great opportunity to ask them, or to, you know, if somebody on the group, anybody on the call has insights or ideas to support.
Yep. I want to pass that off to Don. He's further along than me on kind of the technical side requirements. He's already mentioned sort of our needs. So I'll leave it to him to throw out that, you know.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I have a question that I like to direct to Matthew Drummer. Do you guys have pulmonary medical doctors that you interact with relative to generating your designs? I mean, how do you actually fully understand the physiology of the lung? Do you have somebody in-house that works with you on your designs?
No, we don't have anybody in-house that knows this intrinsically, but we do interact with a lot of medical personnel, and depending on the projects that we're working on, we have contacts with a wide variety of medical practitioners. It's something that we don't have at this instance, but we're hopeful that we could find someone. I know several people that I'm actually trying to contact as well.
Yeah, I've found it hard to reach out to people. Obviously, they're quite busy.
I think Alex had
But
some comment.
but everything that everything I know are things that I have basically educated myself on. And so I think I understand the functionality that's required. And I think I understand what needs to be done, what kind of safeguards need to be built in to safeguard the patient. But I haven't validated that with a professional pulmonary, doctor or therapist. So there's a little anxiety with regard to whether I'm doing enough or whether I'm adding sophistication that may not be required. So that's
healthy.
kind of where that comes from.
I wonder, this is Alex, I wonder if your average physician has the space. I mean, I think it's a little more specialized than that. There are some true specialists in the medical field that probably know a lot more than the average hospital, even the specialists, even their respiratory might have, especially when it comes to some of the safety requirements. I mean, I know a few doctors. I talk to them, and I've learned a lot more by reading some of, starting with Google and going from there. And I certainly concur. Well, I think I have basic design requirements. What the UK government put out was especially helpful.
So this all sounds great. So
Yeah, was that you, Matt, that just responded?
This is Alex.
Or Alex? Okay, yeah, I think the UK specs are, they issue functional specs. The FDA says you need to provide satisfactory evidential information. So they don't tell you how to do the tests or what specifications it needs to meet. They say, convince us that this thing is adequate for the end use. So it's very open-ended. And my understanding is that, and maybe Matt can collaborate this, but that it takes, a year and a half to 3 years to get a medical device approved or a ventilator approved by the FDA. And it can cost between $300,000 and $1.5 million to achieve that goal. So obviously these things are, our target is emergency ventilators that would be used for relatively short-term use, not a $20,000 or $30,000 ventilator that has a much longer useful life.
Yeah, agreed. There's the medical device industry. You move rather slowly in it. But for a typical medical device, they require IEC 60601 testing, which in itself can be about a 2 or 3 month ordeal, even though they always say 2 weeks. And then there's the design inputs, your quality control system that you're building it under. It's a lot of different things actually add cost to the engineering time on it. Right now, the way we're approaching it, we would be at the very initial stages called the design planning stage.
I think we lost you, Matt.
Oh,
I can hear you.
can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Right now, we're at what we would call the initial planning stage or the design input phase. There's a specific process the FDA wants you to go through. It's called CGMP, which in itself, you'll spend hours and hours reading on it. It does take a lot of time to properly design these things. The thing that we're trying to look for here is a basic systems requirement and basic safety requirement.
So it sounds like Donald, Don, and Rob. It sounds like it would be very beneficial to collaborate with Matt, especially because his company seems to me like they have a lot of the expertise in general when it comes to medical devices, and your team has the ability to work on this right now and to work on these and the instrumentation and building one of these units. So it seems like it's good timing. Now that it's early on. What are your thoughts on that, Don?
Well, that's why I sent Matt a chat message 15 minutes ago and asked for his contact information.
Oh, sweet. Okay, good. Yeah, I guess I didn't see that on here. Yes, I
He's
think
he's got a lot of practical knowledge in this area that could help us move along. I mean, we've done a lot of research. I mean, Rob's actually talked to people at the FDA, and we got the emergency use ventilator requirements from them, I don't know, 10 days ago or so. But, you know, it appears to me that they removed, 3 tons of red tape and replaced it with about 500 pounds of red tape. So it still seemed to me that where we stood, we wouldn't be able to achieve that, having no credibility, not being a manufacturer of medical devices. Would be very hard for us to be able to even get approval for an emergency use a machine in the time frame that at least my perspective is in the time frame that it would be required for use in the United States.
agreed.
But there's all the rest of the world, right? And from what we've
Yes.
heard from some of our friends in Brazil and in Pakistan and India and other countries that are more challenged with regard to resources, something as simple as a automated ambo bag would be better than what they have to work with currently. Or that's just
right.
anecdotal information that I've picked up along the way. So, I'm not ready to, say, I mean, on the briefing from the White House task force yesterday afternoon, they came right out and said there is no shortage of ventilators in the United States, or there's no shortage of ventilators, certainly in New York, where the most acute need currently is. And they feel like that FEMA is going to be able to move equipment around and address the hot spots as they develop, because different states or different areas of the country are going to probably peak at different times. And I don't know if that's really factual, or they're just trying to make sure that they're building confidence in their ability. Okay, so you don't know what you can believe in the news.
Yeah, and I think to one of the points that Rob made earlier, this is not going to be a quick fix. And when I was speaking with Rob and I have spoken many times throughout the past several days. We were talking about how there's current fervor in the engineering community to build these units, right? Many, 50 projects happening around the world. But this might not happen quickly. And it's possible that a lot of countries make do without these devices. And it would be a shame and it would be a loss to humanity if all of these projects suddenly died down, and then comes the next wave a few years from now, another pandemic, and then we're still not prepared. So I think this is why I'm trying to say that collaborating with companies like Matt's, Brett's, Jim, other folks, and committing to trying to advance this as much as possible, even if it takes several months, is a good way to go about this, so that eventually there is reliable instrumentation and code or devices that are out there, so that if and when there is another pandemic, that we're a little bit better prepared.
I can't disagree. It's a meritorious, endeavor.
Awesome. Alex, can you tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on briefly? I know that I asked you to present during a future webinar, but do you have any quick thoughts here? I know we're running up an hour already. That was for Alex Bobotek. Okay. Okay, looks like maybe Alex is not able to unmute himself now. Lance, we had introductions earlier, and I think we missed you. I think you joined right afterwards. Do you want to provide a quick intro?
Sure. How are you? Lance Muller. Been in manufacturing for probably about 50 years, well, 40 years. Have taken products from design to prototype to full production for large companies, and not in the medical field, of course, but in other fields, and became interested in how I could help and how we could help here. Really just learning more about you guys, as well as other groups that are trying to accomplish the same mission. And I would just say this, I'm going to just generalize the last statement you just made, where there's 50 projects. I've been around for a very long time, and when this settles, if there's one or two still standing and still moving forward, I would be surprised. What I mean by that is simply, if we give up, it'll happen again, and we'll be in the exact same place. So just the contacts and the communication and keeping it open until somebody actually builds a working prototype, has the ability to produce it quickly at scale, and then distribute it and have it useful. It should be done, because it's going to happen again.
Thank you for that insight. Santiago Rodriguez, I see that you joined, I think after we did the introductions. Would you like to quickly unmute yourself and provide a brief intro and some thoughts? Santiago, it looks like you might be self-muted. I'm not sure if you can mute yourself, but unmute yourself. But all right, no problem. Thank you for that, Lance. Much appreciated. So let's I'll go to the last slide here, and see, it's before last request for Rob and Don. Do you have any last minute thoughts here before we end the call? And if you wouldn't mind, can you please share your contact information here on the Zoom chat as well? But Rob, I'll open it up to you, and then Don for the last minute thoughts.
I concur with most of the things said. Especially the last one. I guess that's our drive to. We're gonna produce 3 prototypes minimum, and if we end up stopping there, that's fine. But we don't want to be, as was stated, starting over again down the road. Anybody that wants to contribute or have access to, we're open to that. Again, we're not going to make any money on this. We're going to probably look at trying to collect a little bit here and there. It won't be much, because like I said, we're not going into major production. So I'll leave it at that. We're going to push till we get a full device to the best of our ability and tested. So the more people that chime in, the better that device will be, especially to the on the medical end of it. As Don said, we're not from that industry. I think a little comment to the the others didn't age and storage well. Everything we design has to operate in a hazardous environment. So we don't have the ability to change a light bulb, if you would, if something happens. Our equipment's 2 miles below the surface of the earth, so it has to work, and it has to work the first time, and it has to keep working. So I think we bring that to the design. Not that we're going to build a bomb-proof device, but those are some of the things we would look at, just because that's how we design. That's our approach.
Thank you.
What kind of degradation is going to happen, and we try to avoid that. And I'll shut up now.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated, Rob, in your presentation. Don, do you have any final thoughts?
Just to reiterate what Rob said, our electronics are all military spec. Our equipment that we design has to withstand, 300 degrees Fahrenheit and 10 to 15,000 PSI and very torturous vibrations for days on end. So, that aspect of it, we understand. We're getting a better understanding of, as I said, the physiology of the lung and and what is involved in the design of commercial ventilator equipment. And then we're trying to determine what we need to target really, to make a machine that is usable, but also robust. So I kind of come from the school of simplicity is the elegant and most elegant design.
Great.
As long as it meets the specifications or the requirements. And so on this project, a lot of it is understanding what the minimum requirements are. And as I said, the FDA doesn't explicitly, they don't explicitly delineate that stuff. They leave it to the industry to tell them or to convince them that their equipment is adequately sufficient for the job. And
Great.
so that kind of leaves it a bit open. And so having access to people that actually work in this industry is, it would be a big help to our team. And our manufacturing arm, does have ISO certifications, and they actually have ISO certifications to make medical instrumentation.
Great.
So that's a good, that puts us in a reasonably, maybe a better position than a lot of companies. So
Great. Don, so do you think it would be valuable now, Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but Don, do you think it would be valuable if a company like Matt's company can talk a little bit about medical devices during the Friday call?
I think that'd be excellent for the entire forum if you could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you're going to have a little bit more expertise there. I'm actually in engineering here. On Friday's call, our CEO, who handles a lot of our regulatory aspects, will be on the call.
Great, Matt. If you can connect me with him, and maybe we can hear some, or her.
Her. I said earlier.
Okay, great. Even better, because all these calls have been very male centric. So hopefully we can have her present, and I can connect with you, Matt, afterwards to see if we can have some slides then prepared ahead of time. Thank you very much for that.
All right.
Her. Okay, perfect. So this Friday, as everybody has heard, and you can see up on the screen here, we have I'm calling it for now the last one of these webcasts. It will be the 6th, and we have covered a lot of different topics already. So please join us. Please share with any group that's currently working on these devices, because we can definitely benefit from having very good questions and answers with Matt's team. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and looking forward to having you on Friday here and joining in. Again, feel free to share the link, and many thanks again to Rob and to Don for your presentation. I'll stay here for a couple of minutes. Please feel free to add your contact information in the group chat if you would like, so people can contact you. Remember, all of this is being recorded, and the chat is also being shared publicly on our website. But with that said, thank you, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you on Friday.